Your stories don't define you, but how you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, Chief Storymaker and your host of this podcast. We share stories for many reasons. We want to persuade, we want to entertain, and we want to connect. But what we sometimes forget is the impact of the stories we tell ourselves. Whether you're sharing personal stories or business stories, how you share them makes a difference in how you remember them and in how you're being perceived by the people you're sharing them with. In this series, you'll hear stories that will resonate with you and you'll nod your head in understanding, and then we'll dig into lessons from each of those stories. How many times have you been sharing a story only to be interrupted by a person eager to share his own? Well, when I'm working with clients on communication skills, I remind them to listen for understanding, but not to respond necessarily. But during this podcast, I'm asking you to listen and consider your related stories, and think about which stories in your life might have impacted you in a similar way.
Well, thank you for joining me today. This is my friend John Sattler that we're going to highlight on today's podcast. And I'm excited to invite him here because we've been connected on LinkedIn for a long time. It's been at least probably 4 or 5 years, maybe even longer. And I reached out to John because, like a few of my other connections, he helps people find jobs. He works with people to help them with their resumes and interviewing, and really helps them prepare so that when they get a job or when they get an interview, they can actually nail it. So anyone who does that kind of work and helps people in that way, in that service, I just have a lot of respect and admiration for. So John, first question I always ask my guests is, could you please share something with us that most people don't know about you? And the reason I ask that question is because as we get into our conversations and start sharing more personal stories, I really love for the listeners to have some idea about who you are and feel just a little bit more connected to you. So what do you think?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. It's easy to say I'm excited about being here, but I am. Like you had said, we've been talking for a long time, and to have the chance to do this and to communicate with a bigger audience is really it really is a privilege. I was thinking about a lot of this the other day, and my LinkedIn profile, it took me a long time to get it full, but I was thinking, it's not even a sliver of who I am, and I think part of that is because maybe compared to a lot of other people I interact with on LinkedIn is, I'm more in the mature stages of my career, let's say. So what I'm doing now in my business of career facilitation, I guess I call it, is this is probably the last business that I'll be in, and I'm real happy about that. I'm happy to say that is a choice, a full choice on my part. And I think what I would want to say as far as, about me that people don't know is that there was many different career, phases before I got into this. And I would say that what people probably don't know about me from reading my resume or looking through the profile is that the people I get to work with now, I never thought, I knew I wanted to do this. I knew it would make a difference in people's lives, but the kind of people that I'm working with, okay, their stories and who they are and what they've done is just so unbelievably fascinating to me. And I don't really get a chance. I don't brag about that much, and I don't really post about it much. But I think it's a pretty fascinating story behind the facade of that profile.
So what people might not know is that, first of all, you're very curious. And I would say that all of my experience in looking at your LinkedIn profile definitely doesn't show that. It doesn't demonstrate your level of curiosity. And I think that's part of what connected us in the beginning, was that I'm always attracted to people who are curious, who want to know more about the people around them, and in a genuine way want to connect more deeply. So thank you for sharing that. You're right. That probably is something that wouldn't come across on your resume or LinkedIn profile. So I invited you to chat with me today because of that curiosity that innate drive to learn more about people in order to help them do what they want to do and get to the goals that they have. So the theme really is about how you get beyond a resume. First of all, as a human, how you get beyond a resume. But second of all, once you submit a resume, when we get past that, what are the stories that get us past the resume stage and into the interview stage? Like how do we go beyond that? Because everybody knows that once you've submitted a resume or an application online, in most cases, it just disappears into the black hole of resumes and online apps. So I have some ideas for that, and I've worked with some recruiters over the years to ask them that same question. But I'm curious to hear your perspective of that because of your curiosity and interest in other humans. So first, let's start with your own story. What was a pivot point for you that drove you to get to this job after all the varieties of experiences that you've had?
That's a great question. And in the varieties of the jobs that I've had, I've worked for a corporation. I've been had my own recruiting business for many years. And there's always been a theme of sales, of selling the services that I have because they've been premium services. But here's the thing. I think one of the reasons why I'm able to help people now in the way that I do is I walk the walk through it. I compromised for so many years in jobs where I dreaded getting in the car in the morning, and I was tired by the time I was pulling out of the driveway. So when I made the decision to do this, where my eyes were really kind of opened as a recruiter, I knew that I would have a story or could relate a real life situation to them. But what brought about me getting in the business of resumes and job search facilitations was in 2013, I was in this business, but I was just floating along, and I was getting referrals, but I wasn't active. I wasn't really putting myself out there. And whoever kind of came along, and I knew I could write a good resume and get some interviews. Then I was diagnosed with kidney cancer in 2013. And that is a disease that if you've ever experienced it or had the unfortunate, it seems like it's an epidemic once you get it. It seems like so many people have it and it's washing over the culture. But anyway, I got that and I had to have a kidney removed. And what happened was I was extremely lucky because that organ is very isolated. I had my left kidney removed. It's very isolated. So they found out about that through a routine checkup. I had no symptoms. And I did not have to get radiation. I did not have to get chemotherapy. I just had to have an operation to remove my kidney. However, I didn't realize
I just had to have an operation
until I saw an X-ray of my torso, after the operation. That's what really set off me being dedicated to, like you said, really going full out on satiating my curiosity. I've always been fascinated by the human condition, always been fascinated by the big questions. When I was a little kid, I would go to church and I would hear things about, we pray for these people. And I would get home and pray and say, well, I want to pray for everybody all over the world, Not that I was a saint, but you see what I mean? I was thinking,
why are we limiting this?
Yeah. So
we have more love than that.
Exactly. So as I've gotten an adult, I've done a lot of, I'm just fascinated. Again, I'm more of an observer. I probably would have been a journalist in another life, but I'm fascinated by the big questions of why we're here, why people do what they do, human interaction, just the human condition. So after I had the operation, I slowly began to really understand what this business could open up for me intellectually. A little bit selfish, but open up for me intellectually. And once I acknowledged that, and once I said, John, you're good enough, you're I hate to sound like this, but you're smart enough where you can interact with the type of people that you will find fascinating. and you're going to be okay. You can do that. You've read enough, and you'll be able to do that. And I had some other help along the way. So what's happened is,
Oh, wait, back up.
okay.
Who was the first client, or one of the first clients after your post-surgery that you had that experience that you went, all right, this is right. Total confirmation, your very first client, and what was your first interaction with that person?
That,
or one of your first?
Back, because it was a couple of years ago, but I will tell you, the first one, I don't know whether it was just then, but it was close enough to then. The first person that I really said, whoa, was when it was actually just a couple of years. It was when it was obvious that that this administration, the Obama administration, was going to be leaving. Of course, they knew that well ahead of time, right?
Right.
Right. So for some reason, I had done some business with somebody at one of the big lab companies, and him and I just hit it off really, really well. And he had friends in the White House. The long story short, I got a chance to work with several people on Joe Biden's staff when they were exiting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those people was an immigrant from Sierra Leone. And if you know anything about Sierra Leone, it's not the French Riviera. You know what I'm saying? It's horrific. And she was brought up, with the help of the United Nations aid and everything. Anyway, this person immigrated to the United States, was very lucky to get here. When she finished school, she enlisted in the Army, got an education through the Army, and I have it listed here. She became the first Army physician's assistant ever to be assigned to the White House, the first medical officer in history assigned to the vice president as a military aide, the first female PA ever assigned to the White House as director of medical advance. Now, this little girl grew up wondering if the next UN truck was going to come around the corner the next day to be fed. And that's what really opened my eyes to say, if I keep going and I believe that I have something to offer, this is going to be a pretty fascinating journey.
That just gave me a chill. I mean, just thinking about this little girl growing up there and the violence that she experienced every day, and not knowing where her next meal was going to come from, not knowing if the water she was drinking was going to poison her. Yeah. I do have a friend from that area that immigrated to the U.S., and she ended up with a PhD and teaches at Carroll College here in Helena, Montana.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing?
She contributes so much to our community that every time I have an opportunity to talk to her and hear part of her story, I'm just floored by that. All the things that we take for granted, we who grew up here. And that's amazing.
Here's just the last bit of that. Well, just to top off that story, she's an Army officer and went to Iraq and is a multi-Purple Heart recipient on top of that. So, that was a little bit humbling,
Yeah, and humbling is the right word. Yeah, I just read this description of the word, the words that people use. I'm humbled, and in most cases, that's the wrong word. In most cases, honored is the better word. But humbled, I feel almost smaller as a result of hearing those stories. And I think that's a good thing every once in a while to sense that, not necessarily to feel bad about ourselves, but to recognize the value of our diverse community and the people that we have an opportunity to get to know. So did you get to meet her in person?
No, I don't get a chance to meet and I work globally. I have clients in Western Europe, all over the United States, and then some Singapore as well. No, and there was a little bit of a challenge working with her as well, because they're so busy. Right. I mean, their schedules are like nothing I've ever seen. No, but I got a chance to know enough of her. And again, what really, maybe going selfishly to me, is that to have any part she wanted to transition into a civilian position doing what she does best, right? And to have a little part in that. That I was asked to do that and I contributed to that. I thought, hey, this is a pretty good job. So,
I love that. And that's something that so many of my guests have said over the year that I've been doing this, and these are the people I admire and respect most, are the ones that say, to have even a small part in the success of this other person is just such an honor. Yeah. And I mean honor, not humbling.
honor and humbling. And to carry that on, like what you were saying about how do you get past, how do people get past, how do employers get to know them or get a feel for them beyond their resume? Well, it does start with the resume. I found out that, resumes are very, very important these days because companies are so understaffed and they really have to speak. They do a lot of heavy lifting. But beyond that, I would say that, and again, I've worked with a lot of people in several different countries, and most of them are, higher level execs. And, what we do is we take the bull by the horns and we get away from sort of any rules that have been written about this. And, the mission is, and my clients like me to use that word mission, like, I said that to somebody the other. I said, you're on a mission here. And you really related with that. And most people are that want to switch jobs. They're either not happy or they feel like, they're not being fulfilled or they're between jobs. So, people really, when they're in a serious job search, when they've decided voluntarily or involuntarily that they want to take their career to another level, they are on a mission. And I am sort of their facilitator on that mission. And what we do is we don't really follow rules. What we want to do is we want to get to the people within companies of choice, and we want to present this person that I'm working with. We want them presented to the people who are going to make decisions, and we want to do that in a way that's very human and very powerful and very effective. And the way I found that we do that is just like what you've been talking about, is we relate with them on a human level. There's nothing like two people getting together and talking and relating on a human level. And voila, that works in job search. It really, really does. So.
Wow. Yes, that makes sense to me. And I know that resume is the place to start. And I know that there are lots of resources out there to help us at every level. So tell me a story about a time when you submitted a resume personally and were looking for a job, and what got you past the resume stage? What got you the interview? Is there anything that kind of pops into your memory about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I could really speak to that because it's been so long. But what I can do, I was a recruiter for 13 years, and I started this business 9 years ago. So it's been a long time. But what I can do is relate stories and pick out one or two with my clients and how my clients did that. Because the fact of the matter is, you're right. There is tons of information out there about job search. About 50% of it is okay. About 50% of it would never be applicable because, to know how to do something and say you know how to do something is one thing. To actually be able to do it is quite another. And I will say that most people need help in job search. It's become much more complicated and it's become much more nuanced. Unfortunately, you would think that, hey, if somebody created a good resume and submitted it to a job that's open, then that's really all you should have to do. They're either going to call you or you're not. It's not like that anymore. What one has to do, and this is where I think my value comes in with my clients is, we get married, we partner up, for 3 weeks. The job search program is about a 3-week program. And again, what we do is we don't talk about just the companies. We talk about the kind of boss they want to work for, because we know people leave bosses, they don't leave companies. So we want to make sure that the mistakes that were made in the past are not made now. So I would say to you, to answer your question directly, is that, we start with a great resume, and there's a lot of time put into those. It probably takes about 10 hours of writing, just writing, to get one right, okay? But what we do is we don't answer job ads. We find key people, and we have our ways of getting to them and having them respond to us, okay? Then what we do is we go through a step situation where the last thing we do really is present the resume. We want to get a diet. We want to warm them up a little first before we dump the whole load on them, right? So it's multi-step process. It's not an easy process. It's not even an intuitive process. And the only reason I know about it is I've been doing it through trial and error for many years.
Right.
And that's what is successful. If you look at this thing like you're on a mission and you're willing to take direction and do things, that expression, outside the box, and do things differently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you will increase your odds dramatically of getting in front of people within a company that you really want to work for, okay? Mm-hmm. What a lot of people fall into, it feels good to sit behind a keyboard, right? And answer ads, because if you've answered 10 ads at the end of the day, you feel like you've really done something. Well, here's the bad news. You ain't done nothing.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to answer those.
I was thinking about what you were saying about finding somebody that a key person in the organization you want to work for, doing all that background research. And I realized that one of the things that people underestimate is what you can do while you're employed, even if you're happy in your job, especially if you're happy in their job, is making sure that you are connecting deeply with the people around you, not just the colleagues within your organization, but all of the people outside of your organization that you work with. And the reason I say that is I think people underestimate those relationships and what they can bring to you when the time comes to leave. And my example is when I was a director of sales at a hotel, and I worked my tail off for my clients. It mattered to me that every event that was planned at my hotel went well, and that I would stay until 7 or 8 o'clock at night hosting to make sure the electronics worked, to make sure they had enough extension cords, to make sure that the food was laid out properly. And as a result of that, when I left that company, because it was an abusive situation, it was a really hostile and volatile environment, and not that most hotels and hospitality are kind of busy, but this was ugly. And I actually left without having anything to go to, because it was that kind of hostility. And when I sent an email to my current clients and my past clients that I knew I still wanted to work with before I left, I just said, I am no longer working here. I just want to give you a heads up that this woman, and I put my assistant's name down, will be taking all your calls, and she will be able to help you. So don't be surprised when you don't see my face. She's going to be great for you. So it was really taking care of them. And that's what I was thinking about when I wrote it. It wasn't about where's my next job going to come from. It was because I knew that they would panic if I wasn't there the next time they called. So I, listed very specific things going on with projects and where they could find help.
Uh-huh.
And I hit the send button and had CC'd my personal email address on it, and let them know in the message, my personal email address is copied in this message. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. And within 15 minutes of sending that message, I had a call from one of my clients who had lots of events at my location and said, so what are you doing now? And I said, well, I don't actually know yet. I haven't decided. And he said, come work for me.
That's fantastic.
And that's the only way. I mean, it's really hard everywhere, but I can tell you in Montana, getting a job here, it is definitely through your network. The people that you know, the people who have worked with you, know your value, understand your strengths. Those are the people who are going to get you a job. And 3 weeks later, I started at a new job. It was, and I loved it. I mean, it was with the university system, it was a state agency, and what I was doing was really rewarding. And my next job came from that, meeting somebody through that. So I think people underestimate the value of connecting deeply and definitely demonstrating your strengths in every job you have.
You have great instincts here, and I'll tell you why. When I was talking before about, we want to get to and open up a dialogue with decision makers, and I talked about the step-by-step process. Part of that step in the research is finding people who can make those introductions. And I'll tell you, one of the things, and I actually posted on this the other day, one of the things that took me a couple of years to realize is most of us, I call it, have a dream team sort of hiding in plain sight. And when we go to, even if you really haven't consciously cultivated it consistently, your network, if you're in job search mode, I'll tell you, one of the first places we go is the person's existing network. And I've worked with CEOs that never thought of that, and one of the first things we do, voila, is we look down and there may be 500 connections there. But one of the first things we do is we look through their whole network and we say, which one of these people that we trust and we respect, who are respected, trusted people in their industries, are there any people in my network, in that network, who work for companies that we would like to work for? I can't tell you how many people have ended up getting offers very quickly just by doing that. Mm-hmm. And that's very similar to what you did. You stumbled into it, right?
Yeah, as usual.
But that is very, very powerful, because I think it's 50% of the hires in the United States come from a referral from a respected employee inside the company or a respected third party. So, and LinkedIn is a gem with this, because they've got the algorithm now where really wherever you go, they're showing you, people who might be able to introduce you to other people. And that's the importance of building a network with people you actually know, because you don't want to end up with 800 people and only know about 20 of them. But tapping that network, looking through that network, that existing network, that's where the low-hanging fruit is in a job search. That's where
I think it's really important too at this point to remind people that they have to demonstrate their strengths. They have to demonstrate what good employees they are, what they do, how good they are at what they do. They have to demonstrate that in every job, because you don't want to wait to build your network until you need them. And the best way to build a strong network is to build a network of people who already know how good you are at what you do. I just find that some people forget that they are demonstrating their brand with everything they do at work.
Every phone call, every interaction with a vendor, every interaction with like a family member of a coworker, everywhere. Because and you're right, I kind of hate to say this, but you're really right, Sarah. I don't hate to say that you're right, but
you love saying I'm right. Come on.
A lot of people burn bridges without knowing it. Like, yes. I've had it happen to me. We get done with doing something, and then I never hear from the person again until 2 years later. They're back on the job market, and it's very, very important. Like, I've had people. I say, when you go to an interview, even though if you think the interview is a dud, how many people in today's corporate interview environment, you're going to meet at least a half dozen people when you go on site for an interview. You need to make a good impression. Don't ignore anybody, and make sure when you do your follow-ups that you follow up with everybody, because you know what? In a year, one of those people might remember you when they start their own business.
Exactly. I had exactly that conversation with somebody. There are two that just popped into my head. One was, just because that job that you're interviewing for doesn't work out, they don't hire you, or you realize it's not a good fit, that doesn't mean that one of those people in the room didn't see some spark in you that they want to refer you to somebody else. And it could be within their organization, a different department, which happens a lot, especially in state agencies. But it also happens that outside of the business, maybe somebody in that room had already been planning an exit strategy, and they're like, I want to take this person with me. And they will look you up. It happens. And
it's like an iceberg.
It is. And people forget. I think one of the hardest situations for me one time was when I was working with somebody on a resume. I'm not a resume person, but this was a few years ago, and this person it was a friend of a friend, and she said, will you please help him with the resume? He's a really good guy. He just needs to, get his resume updated. He just got laid off from this position. So we went out for coffee and I started talking to him. He seemed like a nice enough guy. But when I started talking to him about his previous jobs, he was complaining about every job he had. And it was all about how it was somebody else's fault that this happened. It was somebody else's fault that happened. And I realized I couldn't help him until he started taking responsibility for his brand, because he wasn't doing a good job. He wasn't a good employee. I wasn't going to fix up his resume so he could get a job and disappoint somebody else. So, and I actually kind of said that to him. I tried to be gentle, but I said, I asked him what the common factor was in each of these situations. And I spoke it back to him. I said, well, in this job, this happened. And then in this job, this happened. And then in this job, this happened. What's the common factor here? And we had an interesting conversation. I could tell I was getting him kind of riled, and I didn't mean to. But again, I couldn't help him unless he recognized that he wasn't working very well. He wasn't doing his job well. He wasn't maintaining his network in a positive way. And I actually said, I'm sorry, I can't help with your resume until you start turning around your attitude, because you're complaining about every job you've ever had, which means that something internally isn't fitting with what you're doing. So either you need to change direction completely, find a job completely different outside of this industry and in a different role, or you need to figure out why you're so unhappy in the role that you're doing.
Exactly. That saying, is wherever you go, there you are, right?
Exactly.
I found that, unfortunately, when somebody's in that mindset, they feel like a change of circumstances is going to be a panacea, where it's not.
No.
And in my role, where when I run into that, what I say to them, because sometimes there's a lot of anger and resentment built up and stuff, and I just say, look, you can talk to me about the negative experiences, and you can complain to me, but it's all got to be between us, because the way we're going to kind of, our mission here, you're not going to talk like that to anybody else. This is what we're going to do. Okay. So if you need to complain, you need to vent or anything, vent to me, but don't vent to,
and God forbid, don't do it on Facebook.
Right, or anywhere.
Employers are looking there.
Exactly. But this is very, very, you bring up a great point. It's nowadays, between the toughness of the job market, even though there are a lot of open jobs, and social media, that you almost have to, one almost has to kind of be conscious all the time of, who you're interacting with and how you're interacting, and, save the negativity for, a trusted friend, that you can share and trust and confide in, because again, it's a complicated step-by-step system. It's simple, but it's not easy. But once you get it, once somebody is again willing to take direction and invest in their career, and do things a little differently than they used to do them, really the world can be an oyster. But that's a big step, especially for people who may be a little more mature, in their age, or people who never really had to face adversity. It's just that job search thing is a very, very different thing. And that's why I feel like, what I do brings a lot of value. There's a lot of people out there doing similar things to what I do, and some of them are pretty good. some of them probably, I don't know, they may not be that good. Like resumes, everybody thinks that they can write a resume. Everybody, oh, I can write a resume. But you brought up another good point a while ago about value. A resume really has to communicate value. What is your value proposition? What value can you bring to a company? And we take it a step further than that. We take the information that we gather, the research, and the job, and if there is a job description, and I have my clients write out what I call a value proposition bullet sheet, and we get very exact about how their value fits into that exact job.
That sounds like an awesome activity. Really awesome. I love that.
Yeah. So once you go in prepared like this, I've touched on different aspects of this, but I think listeners and you get an idea for the time and the effort and the energy that's put into switching jobs, being on that mission. Because I can guarantee you, if you're able to get a hold of the right decision makers and you go in prepared like this, you're going to probably be ahead of your competition.
Because a lot of people don't go in prepared. And I think it's important to also mention that your resume isn't just for job search. As a matter of fact, I'm working on mine right now because as a business, I want to be certified with the state. And in order to do that, I have to submit a resume along with all my other information. So it's not just for a job search, and having it ready and up to date is always a really good thing, because then once the time comes and you have to submit it, it's like a bio. How many times do people ask for your bio?
Being an entrepreneur like you are, it's always good. But also, if you're somebody who is not an entrepreneur and you're a professional and you're kind of climbing the corporate ladder, or you are building your career, you want to have your resume up to date, ready to go, because a recruiter can call you tomorrow, or you may hear about a great new job tomorrow. And the last thing you want to do is have a recruiter call and start scrambling around on the phone.
Especially, even if you're not looking for a job, most recruiters that are calling executives or people in high-level management, they're calling the passive people that aren't looking for a job. And so you just never know what opportunity is going to drop into your lap. And if you're not sitting in the right seat, it's going to miss your lap, or you're going to stand up too quickly. I always have an image.
It's a great point, because I would say 35 to 40% of my resume business is just that, successful people who just want to be ready, for the next thing that comes along. Very important. Very important.
So before we finish up, I'd love to hear one more of your stories about how you responded when you had a client that really made an impact on you. Can you share one more of those?
Sure. I have a couple that I was thinking about, but I will share one. Oh, these are tough. Okay.
You can share both if we end up with time.
All right. One is, sometimes people get mad when you're in my position. The culture shock of finding out what it's really going to take, especially if you've been skating along, of what it's really going to take to go on a mission to get to land a new job that you're really going to like, and it isn't going to have those problems, and you're not going to lay in bed at night, especially on Sunday night, dreading going to work. Well, I had somebody get pretty upset with me. He had approached me, and I had laid out what we could do, but he was one of those people, and any salesperson listening to this can relate. He kept stalling. Well, I have this opportunity, and I'm going to know at the end of the week. And at the end of the week, I'll call you. And I know we'll get to that.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
About 6 weeks. So finally, in a polite, professional way, because I've been through it many times, I just wrote back and I said, look, let's just kind of cut this off. I see, where you are with this. So if you're ready, call me or email me and let's get going. But if you feel like you want to keep pursuing these other things, go ahead, but I have to kind of pull out. Well, he let loose on me, I mean, he wrote, it wasn't really personal, but he got into a very big email. He tried to, he emailed, and it just like he's a journalist, right? And he was gonna write a book, and I was gonna be the first chapter where the theme was gonna be my terrible job search experience.
Great,
So,
that would go over well.
Anyway, but again, I've learned that I just ignored it. I didn't participate. So about a month later, I get an email from him. All right. And he said, John, it was just so gracious and so reassuring, and so you're reassuring humanity almost, But he said, John, look, I look back at those emails over the last week, and I apologize for how it went. This is the kind of stress I'm under right now. And it's not an excuse, but it really contributed to why I behave that way. And if you'll have me, will you work with me over the next month or so? I'm going on a little sabbatical, but I'll be back in a week. Would you do this and accept my apology? Well, of course. I mean, I did it. And this guy and I are probably going to be friends for life. I just finished up with him last week. We got him interviewing. He's got, new faith in the system. And, but that was very, very heartwarming, because it's happened before. And I see on, LinkedIn a year later, the person's still struggling, looking for a job. So that was really a good one. That was really.
That's a good story.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing. It warms our hearts, and it also gives us faith that that people get their contribution to their problems.
Exactly, and
that's so important.
Exactly, and that that I did the right thing by pulling back and not trying to make an argument. You know what I mean? Because that's what worked. So, but if you have time, I want to tell another story.
Yeah, one more.
This a guy called me up. Was in a family home building business for 20 years. Was miserable, but couldn't quite pull himself out of it. And then called me up a year later and was ready to work for me or work with me then. The bottom line is the reason I'm telling this one is there's a lot of people in family businesses out there that are caught in situations that are very entrenched. They're not very happy. And if you're in a family business and it's not really clicking, it's probably not a good situation for you.
Right, because you could ruin all kinds of relationships.
Yeah, because this involved a father that was pretty abusive, and it was making deals with banks and making deals with suppliers without telling anybody. And my client was literally to the point where he was breaking out in hives and was just like, he wasn't sleeping and he was breaking out in hives. And this is a good man. I mean, I don't want to reveal a whole lot about him. Right. This is a good man, active in his community, great family guy. And
headed for an early grave.
Yeah, and exactly. And he knew it, and he knew it, and his wife knew it. And he's probably in his early 40s. So anyway, long story short, he didn't know what to do. He's in the home building business. I don't know anything else. So what we did, but he was a kind of an IT geek on the side. So what I said was, look, let's take both of those things and see where your value really lies, okay? And his value lied in software, construction design software. Mm-hmm. So we came up with that, okay? He didn't realize it, but he had a lot of people that understood exactly what was going on in that business and were really willing to help him once he reached out. Long story short, it took about 2 months, but he landed a job in a great company that does that. I see him posting with a big smile on LinkedIn all the time. And he's just really, really happy. And the last time he wrote to me, he said, John, this is really the job is probably, more stress-free than I anticipated, but that's a good thing because I really need a couple of years of stress-free. But that was I think I got closer to him than anybody else that I've ever worked with. And I've gotten close with a lot of people. And that, to wrap up, that's a great phenomenon about what I do that I did not anticipate. I mean, what to have that type of input into somebody's life when he's on the brink of just utter misery in that situation, and to help him out of that. Now he wanted to help himself too, but
right, they have to. Mm-hmm.
Okay, think of his kids, his spouse, the community, and
everyone benefits.
He was able to escape an abusive parent situation. How many millions of people want to do that on top of it all? So that was a phenomenal one.
Oh, I don't know if there's a word to describe that feeling of success and that honor of being able to help somebody like that, because you're right, it impacts everyone around them. And it's kind of magical that way, how we can have that impact and it's a relatively small thing. I mean, when you look at it, it's so easy to have that impact on people if you just want to, if you make that effort. And whatever you're doing, whether you're helping them find a job through their resume and the whole job search process, or whether you are just saying thank you to them at the grocery store, or smiling at them as you open the door for them as they walk into the bank, or whatever it is. And it's not just that person that you're impacting.
Yeah, it's definitely a ripple. I want to add one thing real quick here, not to get too personal, but I had come from a psychologically very abusive son-father relationship. And I've gotten help for that, but this helped. You see how this could be cathartic?
It helped you work through really some of what you did and what you needed to do.
Help him. But I was able to share. I didn't go into a lot of details, but I was able to really relate with what he was going through, which got my emotions, which spurred me to action to really help him. And it was just great. And this is my business, you know.
I know, isn't that great? But also what you were doing, even if you never shared your background with him, it opens up a level of vulnerability that you have with your client, even without sharing the story, because you recognize what he's going through. And I think that creates the most powerful relationships, and definitely the most helpful, is that level of vulnerability that we open when we understand what somebody is going through. We can't necessarily feel it, although we definitely can have that sense.
Empathize. We can empathize.
Yeah. I think even more important, just recognizing it and acknowledging it and knowing that it's coming from that place. So, John, thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to more conversations with you in the very near future. For our listeners, absolutely. For our listeners, I will have a link to John's website so that you can learn more about what he does on the blog post associated with this podcast. And I'll also have his LinkedIn link so that you can connect with him on LinkedIn and learn more about what he does through that. So thanks again, John.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Share Them Will. Please visit my website for more podcast episodes, blog posts, and information about how I can help you develop and share your stories at elkinsconsulting.com.